Now, as for the costs, I was going to quote some of the figures, but you already talked about that as to what we have committed to help with law enforcement and training, because we do understand that there's going to be costs to this borne by law enforcement and provinces and municipalities, which is why we've committed to. And I keep having to look at these numbers because I can never commit them to memory, but it's 274 for law enforcement and border efforts, and another 161 million for the training of frontline officers in recognizing impaired driving. Because we know that this is going to stretch your resources without this. There's going to be other costs as well, but right now, as the system goes, we have people who are being arrested, charged in the courts. We know that's expensive. We know that's costing a lot of money. I'll start with you, Ms. Holmes. Would you not agree that that money is going to be saved to the system? Is that not going to be a substantial saving to our system when we're no longer arresting people for simple and charging them for simple possession?
Well, to be honest, I don't particularly see myself as an expert in the number of cases that would be for a criminal court in Alberta. Mm-hmm. So I can't say whether or not there would be a significant cost. Mm-hmm. I just know that in the concern that we have addressed the fact that we think that there will be costs when it comes to enforcement in regards to training and equipment. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, there will be additional costs as well. Mm-hmm. And an example I can give the committee is in smaller municipalities, they have a completely different capacity to be able to absorb these type of legislative changes than in a large city. Mm-hmm. So in that case, we're going to need to have training for even just municipal councillors on how to create the bylaws that they're going to have to put into place mm-hmm. in order to have this happen. So there is cost beyond just enforcement, mm-hmm. but that being said, I would anticipate there would be savings. I just can't answer appropriately for whether or not what the amount would be.
Certainly. Okay. Mm-hmm. And from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, what are your thoughts on that? Do you see... Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. A little delay here. We apologize for that. Much rather be in Ottawa there with you, but can't pull that off today. So our position is that legalization simply will not reduce the workload of our local police services. In fact, with the different issues coming forward, we'll expand them. So to break down what savings there may be, that work really hasn't been done. But overall, we believe that there will be significant costs associated with enforcing all the new rules, such as impaired driving, personal cultivation, possession limits, providing cannabis to minors, those type of issues. So, at the end of the day, we do believe that there's significant cost increases.
So you don't think there's going to be... But you say it's going to increase the workload despite the fact that officers are not going to be arresting for simple possession?
We really do truly believe that based on the other issues that compound their workload.
What would be examples of the things that would increase their workload under this that would more than counterbalance the savings in workload from arresting people for possession?
So yes, thank you for that. And we have given considerable thought to that. Certainly the impaired driving issue and the testing that needs to be done when it comes to capital costs, equipment that may need to be bought. We certainly do recognize that the federal government has contributed some money, and that's appreciated. But really, we don't believe that that's going to cover all those costs.
Okay, and that's understandable. Now, another question regarding, again, let's talk about impaired driving. We do know that impaired driving due to cannabis right now is an issue. It's to
add some information when you're finished about impaired driving.
Okay, I want to finish this line of questioning first. We have some issue. We do know it's an issue, and we know it's out there. Right now, we don't have the tools to deal with it, despite the fact that we know it's widespread, and we don't even quite know the extent of it. Would this not be an advantage to your law enforcement officials and to your municipalities that we are now introducing a way to deal with a problem that we haven't really been equipped to deal with up to now? I'll start with you.
So The way that I look at it when it comes to impaired driving is, yes, we do have an issue with it now, but as right now, the average person considers that cannabis is illegal. So when we have it legalized, then I think the public education campaign in regards to looking at impaired driving is going to be key, because there will be an increase, there's no question. And the concern that we have is that we are not confident that there is going to be technology in place on July 1st that will be able to implement into our local police detachments to be able to deal with this. And to give an example, like you were saying about the increase in workload, from what I have been told by RCMP officials in Alberta, an example of how it would impact Morinville is if someone was pulled over suspected of being impaired on cannabis by a community peace officer who is able to enforce traffic law, they would then have to call the RCMP in to be able to take that person to a hospital to get a blood test to determine whether or not they are, because as of right now, we don't have technology in place to do any sort of roadside screening. So there would be a workload of having an RCMP officer, of which I only have 9 in a municipality of 10,000, that would have to go and sit in a hospital in a different municipality waiting to find out whether or not the person is impaired. That's as far as I understand it. So there is a significant concern that I have over the increase that we're going to see in impaired driving, the lack of education around it in the public, and then the idea that I don't have information that I've received that we have proper enforcement tools available.
You won't see an increase in impaired driving because of cannabis.
Time's up, but Ms. Emery, you wanted to make a comment?
I understand driving and cannabis is a major issue and a concern, and I am not advocating impaired driving. But the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration of the United States released a report in 2015 that called Drug and Alcohol Crash Risk, and did not find an increase in crash risk associated with THC. And even more recently, the American Journal of Public Health, as we are here at the Health Committee, in 2017, July, very recent, please look this up, that changes in motor vehicle crash fatality rates for Washington and Colorado were not statistically different from those in similar states without recreational marijuana legalization. And we do know that police, this is recent studies, so please do look this up. And I'm not encouraging impaired driving, but the vast majority of cannabis consumers are not driving impaired. Their judgment is not impaired like with alcohol. With alcohol, you think you can drive and you know you can't. With cannabis, you know when you can't and you won't drive. But we also have to consider the hundreds of thousands of medical marijuana patients in this country who are unable to drive or contribute or work if they don't use cannabis. So if you criminalize those who drive under the influence of cannabis, you're going to criminalize every patient and poor medical user across this country. What we're also finding is that this targeted harassment, as we've admitted, would require taking someone to a hospital using a needle, drawing their blood against their will when they don't get to give consent. And for what? To prove that they've consumed cannabis or to prove that they're impaired? Because impairment is proven by performance. Whether you're driving behind the wheel on pharmaceutical drugs that say do not operate heavy machinery or vehicles while using these pills, whether you're angry because you had a fight, or whether you're texting. Texting is proven to increase crashes. We know it. It happened immediately. You can immediately say, cell phones and texting create distracted driving, create increased crashes on the road. It's demonstrable, it's proven. Cannabis, you can't prove it. And that's why the police and law enforcement are falling all over trying to figure out how do we find a test? How do we set a blood limit? And as an official endorser of Washington State's Initiative 502 campaign, I was part of the legalization along with my husband's prosecutor, so you can find common ground with people who worked against you before. But they admitted that they only had a blood level for cannabis because doing so would encourage the public to support that initiative. What we have to acknowledge is that decades of prohibition and misinformation generated by the government and fear about driving cannabis is actually discouraging people from finding out the truth about cannabis. And as I said, American Journal of Public Health 2017 studied this extensively. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Cannabis is not a crisis for the roads. Police should be focusing on alcohol and truly dangerous drugs.
Thank you very much. Now we go to